Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about, in my opinion, what I think is actually one of the worst astrology charts ever. And anyway, to get started, the first thing off is, well, in this particular chart, I'm going to talk about the person anonymously. But anyway, this person, she has 8 of 10 planets below the horizon and much more introverted than gregarious. I felt I mean, this is what that could indicate anyway, the much more pessimistic and negative as opposed to being optimistic and upbeat. And when you have a preponderance of energy, planets below the horizon in houses 1 through 6, you could be much more subjective, often in contrast to being objective. And she has Cancer ascendant at 29 degrees, which I feel, in my opinion, is the full culmination and energy of that sign. And remember, 29 degrees can be seen as a critical degree. It's often an upheaval and crisis-oriented degree. And her life was just like in perpetual crisis in terms of her home life, very peripatetic. She moved numerous times, and really, she struck me as someone that had a lot of a tremendous difficulty in finding happiness and stability in her home and domestic life. She also has, get a lot of this, she has Mars in its fall in Cancer at 29 degrees. Home life is really a perpetual battle often for these people. As some of you may know, I've said this at least once in a previous video, at least, if not more, that I have my Mars in Cancer. And Mars in Cancer, someone has Mars in Cancer or the fourth house, that home life situation, just fighting for your home life, it could really be that perpetual battle just to have that. And she also has this, as I stated before, I believe she has the Mars in Cancer 29 degrees conjunct her ascendant. And that, coupled with an Aries midheaven, which could be known for having a public image and reputation for being somewhat acerbic and acrimonious, she had a number of contentious, combative situations with others. In many, like in restaurant and fast food places, a lot of this attributed, I believe, to her having the Mars in Cancer and having it at this 29th degree nonetheless. And really, also, too, she has Saturn in retrograde, in its detriment, in Cancer, conjunct the ascendant. And also, this may exacerbate difficulties in the home and family life, I believe, coupled with that Mars in Cancer influence. Now, she also, given, you got to remember too, when you have like a Saturn retrograde, this often can indicate that you may not be always cognizant of your limitations and your restrictions. And because of this, you could be inundated with responsibilities and become physically overwhelmed and I believe run down because of this. And having Saturn, she also has the Saturn conjunct the ascendant as well, which I don't really see as really the best aspect. I have Saturn conjunct my ascendant, and the Saturn conjunct ascendant in her case, coupled with all that preponderance of energy below the horizon in houses 1 through 6, really, I think this really can give a very pessimistic and very negative, downcast outlook. And really, this also, in one of the 2 planets she has on the top half of the chart is Saturn in the 12th. Now, I understand a planet in the 12th house that's considered above the horizon. It's supposed to be, really play a role in more objective energy. But Saturn in the 12th can give, I mean, the 12th house is, I see this as it's about seclusion, solitude, and and really it could arguably be, I think it's the most introverted house and introspective perhaps of all the 12 houses. And I mean, Saturn in the 12th, I have this as well. Saturn in the 12th can give habits connected with solitude and seclusion and be reclusive. And one may actually have a desire to isolate themselves, I think, from society. And I think even though in my chart, I have as far as my planets, I have 8 of the 10 planets below the horizon myself. But one of them, like her chart, Saturn in the 12th, I think the Saturn in the 12th plays a strong role in my introversion, actually. I understand it's just one house placement, but I think that does figure prominently in it. Now, going back to her chart, now she also, well, Saturn in the 12th also can have difficulty, of course, in letting others enter their lives. And on top of this, she has the moon in its detriment in Capricorn, and it's in the sixth house of worry at a critical degree, 26. And I mean, I saw her as everything but a compulsive worrier. She also has Virgo on the third house cusp, which of course doesn't help matters. And I mean, you're talking about, I mean, she's struck me as somebody that was an incessant complainer, complained exorbitant amount of times, and really about things that were not, in my opinion, were not exactly significant. Now, she also has, I mean, when you talk about the moon in Capricorn and Saturn conjunct the ascendant, I saw her nature as a little bit colder than the typical Cancer ascendant person would be. And she also has Mercury in its detriment in Sagittarius. Now, I mean, I understand planets and energy, you're talking about in their detriment and fall could still have positive attributes and qualities. Mercury in Sag can be prophetic and even visionary and have good vision, but often have difficulty seeing the details and may try to arrive at an opinion without examining all the facts. I mean, somebody might try to get go to one really to phase C without really going to phase A, really with that Mercury in Sagittarius energy as far as that goes. Now, Mercury in Sagittarius can be really overly blunt in speech and speak what they think is the veritable truth. Now, and then the Virgo on the third house cusp can, of course, modify this to some degree, because Virgo energy, of course, could be very punctilious with details and be a little bit more detail oriented. I think, unfortunately, the way this manifested with her, though, with the Virgo on the third house cusp coupled with the Mercury in Sagittarius, she was somebody that would be very blunt in terms of her complaints about things, in terms of her judgmental, critical communication would come out in a very outspoken, forthright manner, sometimes to the point maybe of demoralizing and embarrassing some people. So anyway, well, another thing about her too, she also has the Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio in the fourth house. And sadly to me, she had claimed she had been raped by a prominent family member at one time. And this perhaps being the Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio, this may have been done to her, unfortunately, with sadistic and even some kind of vengeful, vindictive energy with it. Now, the thing about this too, and then the Sun in Scorpio, not far from the Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio in her chart, may unfortunately have shined the light on this, as this was revealed to me at some point. Now, the thing about, and assuming that was true, of course, I don't know that 100%, but that's what was stated to me. Anyway, now also her moon in Capricorn opposes her Saturn. Now, many people that have the moon in adverse aspect to Saturn in their natal chart can have their parents divorced or separate. Now, she didn't have that in this case, but I do believe her parents had perhaps a somewhat contentious, sometimes even acrimonious situation. And really looking at this as well, the thing about her situation too is, going back to the chart, when you look at the moon making an opposition to her ascendant, coupled with Saturn in the 12th and Venus squaring Saturn, this person, I think, may have had tremendous difficulty perhaps in expression and conveying feelings to others. So, and also too, she has a Cardinal T Square configuration in her chart. She has Venus being the focal point of the Cardinal T Square, and it involves, and also what it has is it has Saturn, the Saturn ascendant Mars conjunction making an opposition to the moon in Capricorn, and those points being squared by the focal point Venus in Libra in the fourth house. Now, the way I look at this is how this could manifest with her, perhaps a perpetual battle between a tug of war between the energy and responsibilities that are home related and things that are close to home with her, perhaps, and even things maybe connected with the past as well. Things of yesteryear, so to speak, that are nostalgic, and also the emotional need for career ambitions, which of course that's the moon in Capricorn energy, and the emotional need for career ambitions and success, which may have often been worried about, considering that was in the sixth house of worry. Now with Venus in Libra, in fourth, the point of over accentuation, emphasis, compensation. Perhaps the way she tried to deal with this opposition aspect was through perhaps enjoyment and expression of artistry, beauty, with what she felt close to home, what she liked to sing, so that was music, so that could be a form of art. And being in the fourth house perhaps gave her emotional security. Now, another thing too, she has the North Node in Cancer at a critical degree, 0, in the 12th house of restrictions and limitations. Now, perhaps this played a role as to why her home life seemed to be in perpetual chaos, given that it is in the 12th house of confusion, chaos, and madness. Now, I think given that the North Node is in Cancer, this could be something where that life purpose, perhaps that mission, what may have been in attaining stability in the home, but had difficulties with this, given that this was it's in the 12th house of restrictions and limitations. But on a positive note, that this could have manifested, the North Node in Cancer in the 12th house could have manifested perhaps in being able to show empathy and sympathy and compassion and care to those that are less fortunate than others, such as the oppressed, the impoverished, and homeless, and even maybe through spirituality. Now, going back to her moon in Capricorn, the moon in Capricorn is a singleton, and this could perhaps accentuate this energy of the moon in Capricorn, maybe make it stand out more, this energy, and remember that the moon in Capricorn, of course, being in its detriment. Now, this could sometimes manifest, I think, as being like the perpetual constant child syndrome, and maybe this played a role astrologically as why she was so dependent on her mother, given that the moon does represent the mother, and dependent on the mother, perhaps seen as undemonstrative, callous, overly pessimistic, and orthodox, given that the sign is Capricorn. And even as an adult, being perhaps exceptionally dependent on her. She also has Venus making a square aspect to her ascendant, so that doesn't help as well, because Venus in adverse aspect to the ascendant can often make that person be exceptionally dependent on other people. But going back to her chart again, now also in addition to everything that I've stated up till now, she has the Sun in Scorpio at 18 degrees in the fourth house. Now, 18 degrees can be seen by many in this astrologically as the degree of the devil. Now, I don't think this necessarily makes one demonic or overly malevolent, but it could indicate some kind of nefarious behavior. And I think perhaps this led to maybe some focus on vengeful, manipulative behavior with family members. And also, interestingly enough, the Sun in Scorpio makes a square to Pluto in Leo in her first house. So perhaps the way this could have worked out was that maybe a strong compulsive urge, maybe to shine in domination, controlling others, and also through manipulation, and really about power issues that were ego related as well. And really, this could have worked out in terms of maybe being often a strong need to constantly, continually transform the inner self, the true self, which of course is the Sun, but consistently being exasperated at who you are. And the thing about this too is this could indicate the going back talking a little more about that Pluto making a square to her sun in Scorpio. This could be about really dealing with maybe a conflict, dealing with dramatic upheavals, which could be the Pluto in Leo, which of course could be shown very outwardly being in her first house, really conflicting perhaps with her basic wants. The sun in Scorpio in the fourth house, being able to control her have power and control in her home and family life. So, and I did notice that with her. I think a lot of that was attributed to that Pluto square sun aspect she had in her chart. Now I want to go back again. I want to go back to her Cardinal T Square she has in her chart. Now, it's not like it's all negative, but there is a lot of negativity connected with that configuration. Now, a Cardinal T Square, of course, could be supremely action and activity oriented. The thing about it is, though, people that have this can start many things sometimes simultaneously and then experience a lot of tension and exasperation due to and maybe impatience and getting antsy and not getting things really maybe quite finished. A lot of it due to this impatient energy, and maybe a lot of it's attributed to starting too many things at once and therefore not being able to finish it, as a result causing a lot of exasperation and really a lot of agitation. On the positive side, T-squares in charts in general can give very strong inordinate willpower and really can accomplish a prodigious amount of things. But in this particular case, given it's a Cardinal T-square, in her case, you can accomplish a great deal if one can curtail the impatient energy. And also what comes with T-squares a lot perhaps is really sometimes arguing over things that can be somewhat trivial or insignificant as well, I think. So also too, I think looking at this, she also, I mean, going back to her Venus square in the ascendant, I think with that aspect, one can sometimes have difficulty loving oneself. I have that aspect, and I think I could be guilty of that, even if it's on a subconscious level at times. Now, not only having difficulty loving oneself with that aspect, I mean, you really basically you're not really loving, perhaps given it's the ascendant, your outer appearance and your projected demeanor, but also in her chart, Venus squares Saturn and the moon. So given that Saturn can represent the father and the moon can be connected with the mother, she might not have felt love or really strong expression of feelings from either one of the parents. So this is where things can where I could see which could cause some upsetment in her. Now the thing is she has 4 planets that were either in the detriment and fall, and like 3 or 4 astrological energies that were in critical degrees. And I mean, this chart is just really one where she, I mean, it's a lot of indication for really adverse health situations, and she's had chronic illnesses during her life. And I mean, really, in having a Cancer ascendant, of course, is one of the biggest, because Cancer ascendant often is not one that exactly has really a robust constitution, so to speak. I have a Cancer sun, but luckily I have a Taurus ascendant, so I think that helps in terms of having a good general constitution and health. And I think I have definitely more vitality and energy than the typical sun in Cancer. However, I'm still susceptible to certain transits to the sun because, of course, you know, the sun can represent the vitality and energy. And recently I've had the transit Saturn making an opposition to my natal sun, and I've definitely felt a little bit more lethargic, sluggish, and being a little bit just more downcast and pessimistic in general. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for what I think is one of the worst astrology charts. And stay tuned next time, where I'm going to be talking about the natal chart of Joseph James D'Angelo, who many of you may have heard has been apprehended recently by the police, and he's the primary suspect in terms of being the Golden State Killer. Anyway, people, 2 things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.